Great to have you along for the ride. Great radio stations across the land. We're also streaming all over the place, including Patriot.tv. Make sure you go there. From San Antonio, it is the Joe Pag Show for your Wednesday. We're expecting a big speech tonight from Joe Biden. Is he going to resign? Is he going to talk about a medical condition? We have no clue what he's going to say, but we'll hear from him for the first time tonight. Knowing that Kamala Harris is assuming that she's the presumptive nominee, I don't think that she is, to be honest, because Obama has not said she's the one yet. I've got to talk to Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard, former U.S. Representative, great state of Hawaii. Tulsi, how are you, first of all?
I'm great. Good to talk to you, Joe.
You know, the reason I've got to have you on is, A, because I love that you'll come on the program as much as you do. I love what you do for the country. Thank you for serving the country. And, man, did you tear Kamala Harris apart in the debates when you were running for president. I wanted to talk to you about that because she's running around saying that she's the presumptive nominee when she's not. So first and foremost, if you don't mind, this is the left circumventing democracy. Clearly, they're telling 14.5 million voters that they're disenfranchised, their votes don't matter. Even though Joe Biden's the presumptive nominee, he decided he's not going to be because he can't win in November. Don't worry about it. We're not the Soviet Union. Just follow our lead. What did you think when you saw that he was not going to run for re-election, that they're handing the torch off to Kamala Harris?
Well, Joe, I think I've probably said this on your show last time we talked. It's something I've been warning against for months, which is we shouldn't be surprised if they swap Joe Biden out for someone else. And we shouldn't be distracted and think that this new someone else is going to result in any new policy changes or a difference in outcome or consequences based on the policies that they may be advocating for. Nothing has changed when it comes right down to it, other than the fact that the Democrat elite, the power elite, have swapped out one figurehead, hoping to replace them with another. Those who've been calling the shots for the first 3.5 years of the Biden-Harris administration are going to continue calling the shots for as long as Joe Biden sits in the seat of the president. And they will do so if Kamala Harris is elected president. So we shouldn't be too distracted by the machinations of what the Democrat elite are trying to do here. It is the power elite who are trying to figure out what is the best way that we stay in power. Let's go back to earlier this year when you had Bobby Kennedy and others who were running to challenge Joe Biden in the Democratic primary. You'll remember that some of them were not allowed to be on the ballot in certain states. They were blocked from being even having their name on the ballot. And other states didn't hold primaries at all. So the fact that Joe Biden was the quote unquote duly elected nominee of Democrat voters is a lie. That never happened. They didn't hold a true primary, which is why Bobby Kennedy left the Democratic Party to run as an independent, and why many of the others dropped out. But secondly, knowing that, we shouldn't be surprised with what's going on now, nor should we believe that President Obama is somehow undecided on who he wants to be the Democratic nominee. They realize this criticism that you have just levied against them carries weight, that Democrat voters should be the one to decide who replaces Joe Biden. And so, of course, he's going to stand out there and say, well, we will hear the voices of the people at the Democratic convention and see who steps up to offer to serve and replace Joe Biden. The writing is on the wall. It's been shouted through a loudspeaker. The Democrat elite feel that Kamala Harris is the one. So whatever happens at the convention, in my view, will be a complete formality. And President Obama will be able to say, hey, I stayed neutral. The people's voices have been heard. Kamala Harris will be the Democratic nominee. It's all political theater. We just can't fall for it. Not at the Democratic convention and not at whatever comes after over these next 3 months. Because I tell you what, they will be continuing to work hand in glove with their friends in the propaganda media. They will continue to roll out the George Clooney's and the Julia Roberts to paint this picture of Kamala Harris as the nominee that is very different from the reality of what we've seen in Kamala Harris's record, trying to further sell these lies to the American people, all because they want to stay in power and all because they want to destroy Donald Trump.
Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard joining us today. For love of country, leave the Democrat Party behind. Go get that book right now. Go to book.tulsigabbard.com. I appreciate you making the time. So clearly Joe Biden hasn't been running the joint. You and I have known, and we've talked about this for the entirety of his presidency. He's not the person who's in charge. They think that we're stupid, and we believe that he just went cognitively into decline on June 27th at that debate. But really, everybody was complicit until that debate, and he screwed up by saying he would do a debate on Howard Stern. then he was exposed. Even Jake Tapper and Dana Bash were even-handed, which tells you exactly how little support he had from the big media by then. Tulsi, who's been running the country this entire time then? Is it Obama? It's not Harris. She doesn't have the ability to run it. Who is it?
Well, as you said, many of us already knew that Joe Biden hadn't been calling the shots and making the decisions about both our domestic and foreign policy for years. That the debate only exposed what so many of us knew to be true.
Right.
I think we should also take note of the fact that Kamala Harris and others continue to try to sell the lie to the American people. Her saying things like, I see Joe Biden every day. He's fantastic. He's incredible. I've never seen him better. You heard that from Morning Joe. You heard that from many of the other people who were supposedly speaking on behalf of the president or for him. The truth is, there have been this power elite of unelected bureaucrats, people of the military-industrial complex, the national security state, those whose power exists only because they have a willing and malleable figurehead that will do their bidding. Yes. And that will allow them to work hand in glove through them so that they can stay in power. The military-industrial complex profits greatly when we are in a constant state of war. They need a president and commander-in-chief that will do their bidding. Yes. The same thing with the national security state. You see how much our freedoms and civil liberties have continued to be undermined under this administration and have been undermined in the past by previous administrations who have gotten us into senseless, counterproductive regime change wars that are not that actually undermine our national security. They don't make us stronger or safer as a people or as a country, which again is why we should feel confident and know for certain, very clear-eyed, that just as this group, this cabal of woke warmongers led by Hillary Clinton herself, who have been making the decisions behind the scenes, will continue to do so for the duration of however long Joe Biden continues to serve in his office, as well as if Kamala Harris or any other Democratic nominee is elected to replace him.
And that's really the issue. Donald Trump will end the war in Ukraine immediately by sitting down, making peace, and getting it done. He also will fix and he'll get off of Israel's back and say, do what you have to do. Let's end this thing now. Iran will be defunded again immediately. But you're talking about powerful entities that are worth billions, if not trillions of dollars that benefit greatly should it be Kamala Harris, who again wouldn't be in charge, but you continue all of these wars. So how do you circumvent that? I mean, Trump's a billionaire. He's got a lot of people supporting him, but you've got entities that we don't even know the names of that are worth trillions of dollars that want to keep these wars going because that's their lifestyle that's at risk here. They'll do almost anything. The man was almost killed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So that right there, that question is the most important question. What do we do? How do we stop this power elite, the deep state, the military-industrial complex, people whose lives and their bank accounts depend on their ability to control and influence the president and commander-in-chief? Very simply, we are the only ones who have more power than them, as much power as they have. And we exercise that power by casting our vote and making sure that our voices are heard. In this election, it's a very clear choice. Donald Trump is the candidate, is the guy who has the strength and independence and loyalties to our country and our Constitution to wrestle back that control from the deep state, take control, and make those decisions that you're talking about to get us out of and prevent more senseless, counterproductive regime change wars, to walk us back from the brink of nuclear war, to make those decisions about our foreign policy that actually secure our nation. You look at the deep state and the neocons and the military-industrial complex. You look at their response and reaction to President Trump selecting J.D. Vance as his running mate. They're absolutely terrified because both of them together have said, nope, we're turning off the tap on this war in Ukraine. There will be a negotiated outcome, whether that's a peace treaty or it takes some other form, that President Trump will take on this leadership role and immediately bring this war to an end. And I believe that he will, which is why they're absolutely terrified, because the hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, not only to Ukraine, you got to recognize that with Joe Biden continuing to escalate this regime change war against Russia using Ukraine as the proxy, what else has happened alongside it? Almost every single NATO country has said, oh, okay, well, we need to spend billions or hundreds of billions of dollars to the military industrial complex as well. So they're the ones who are profiting off of this. And sadly, it's happening on the lives of the innocent Ukrainian people.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. I know that there's a generation of men I've heard has been completely wiped out, and it's not okay. A four-term Congresswoman, 2020 presidential candidate, veteran with 3 deployments to war zones in the Middle East and Africa. It is Tulsi Gabbard. I thought you ended Kamala Harris's political career in 2020, and when they selected her as the vice president after she called Biden a racist to his face on the debate stage, I knew that this wasn't her doing. This wasn't organic. This is being controlled by the people that we're talking about. If you don't mind, I've got to go back and show a couple of minutes of that debate between you and Kamala Harris, where, again, you became the most searched person globally on Google, and I thought that her career was over. I think she ended up dropping out before the Iowa caucus, and I didn't think she had a political future. Then, of course, she's the vice president. Here's just a little bit of that.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting Black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. That would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
She's the likely nominee, Tulsi. By the way, masterful job. She's the likely nominee for the Democrats now. They're going to sell her as a Black female who understands the neighborhood, who understands criminal justice reform, who has done the work as an attorney general and as a senator to help marginalized communities. And you exposed her for who she really was in those jobs. And that shouldn't just go away. That's only 4 years ago. This is very recent that this happened. What do you think going in? They're already trying to sell her in the media as a middle-of-the-road person who is very moderate. Hey, some Republicans can vote for her too, and she really cares about the little guy.
You know, the necessary thing here is to really continue to remind the American people about her record. I talked about just a few brief examples of her disastrous record on criminal justice reform. You can contrast her record with Donald Trump's record as president, right, when he passed the First Step Act, a historic piece of bipartisan legislation. I was very happy to help support and craft that legislation. I had 2 people who I knew very well: Doug Collins, a very conservative Republican from the state of Georgia, who's a good friend, and Hakeem Jeffries, a very so-called progressive Democrat from the state of New York. We all were elected the same year. They set aside their partisan differences, worked together on this legislation with President Trump and Ivanka and Jared and others, and passed it. And what happened? He freed people. He freed Black women and men and families. People were able to go back home and start their lives again. So let's look and compare at President Trump's record on criminal justice reform with Kamala Harris's. Part of her issue that was not raised in that debate and hasn't been raised very much was the fact that she created and led the charge to get a law passed in the state of California that would charge parents with a misdemeanor for truancy if their kids missed over a certain number of days of school, potentially putting them in prison for up to 1 year.
Wow.
NPR at the time, actually just a couple of years ago, documented and told the story of a single Black mother in California who literally was hauled away from her home in handcuffs because of Kamala Harris's actions in championing this truancy law that turned parents into criminals. The list goes on and on about how dangerous Kamala Harris was as the Attorney General for the state of California and how dangerous she will be. Just imagine, she says she'll be a prosecutor president. That's always been her line. She's tough on crime. Well, let's look to how the Biden-Harris administration has weaponized our Department of Justice and law enforcement to go after their political opponents. I have no doubt that if Kamala Harris is president, she would not only continue that, she would escalate it and find and create new laws to charge her political enemies with just like Stalin's chief security officer did.
Yes.
Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. She'll be very dangerous as president and commander-in-chief for many reasons. What she is touting as her strength is actually her weakness, her greatest weakness, when you point out the truth about her record as attorney general, as a U.S. senator sitting on the Judiciary Committee, and her time as vice president in this administration.
And we should never forget that she helped raise money to get people out of prison who are rioting and burning down cities in this country in 2020. That should never, ever, ever, never be forgotten. Go to book.tulsigabbard.com. If you haven't bought the book yet, there's something wrong with you. Go get 5 of them now to make up for that. tulsigabbard.com is her website as well. Let's talk about why you were just in Rome. I find this to be amazing. When you're talking about peace and stability in Europe, there is very little peace and stability knowing what's going on in Ukraine and in Russia. Well, Russia, with their invasion into Ukraine, we know that there is a mass influx of illegal aliens that are coming into Europe at large, and they're just taking over entire countries, and nobody seems to want to stop that either. What is the status of Europe right now when it comes to peace and stability?
That's a very important question that deserves a much longer answer than we have time to give.
Okay.
But you've pointed out a couple of the major concerns, obviously, that are impacting all of Europe, and obviously the United States has a big role to play in this as well. There is a hunger for peace. People are sick and tired, just as the American people are sick and tired of being in a constant state of war in which they don't see how it benefits their own safety, security, or freedom.
Yes.
I spoke with their leaders from different countries across Europe as part of this dialogue that the Vatican hosted on neutral ground, where people could come and speak without cameras, without press, and actually begin to have real dialogue and to begin to build that trust that would be necessary in order to find those areas of common and shared interest in peace and freedom, prosperity, and security. The issue that you raised, I think, is an important one that is not actually often raised in our media, that they are very concerned about. I spoke with some of the leaders in Italy who raised this concern about the continued stream of illegal immigrants crossing into their borders, but more specifically, the increasing rise of Islamists, terrorism and Islamist influence. What is their goal? Their goal is to create Islamic rule over the world.
Yes.
That is the goal of Hamas. It is the goal of Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, ISIS, all of these Islamist terrorist groups. And even those who don't exact political violence as part of that mission, they are trying to bring about that change by enacting Sharia law within the places and the countries where they are increasing their numbers. As you've mentioned, we've seen it in many parts of Europe already, and there's a grave concern. Why? Because this Islamist ideology poses a direct threat to freedom and civilization, and too few leaders in the Western world have the courage to speak up about this and to take action to defeat this, both ideologically, importantly, and militarily when necessary.
Well, what we know is that you've got the courage, and you always have. It's Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard. Go to tulsigabbard.com, book.tulsigabbard.com. Get For Love of Country right now. If you haven't yet, you need to. Tulsi, I know that you're probably jet-lagged, but you jumped in the chair for us, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you so much, and let's talk again very soon, okay?
I look forward to it, Joe. It's always good to see you. Thank you.
You're amazing. We're back after this. Stay right here.